what I'm talking about today is 10 things they don't really teach you in school. Or actually, if I was being really honest, there are 10 things I totally didn't learn in school or my formal education, even if out there were totally great teachers trying to make me pay attention to these things. Somehow they washed over me. But so what I want to do is I want to take you on a journey. I want you to take you on a journey through some of the things that I've learned along the way. I think it's probably fair to start off by introducing myself a little bit. I currently work here in Aberdeen. I work at the University of Aberdeen. I'm working in the area of enterprise and entrepreneurship education. And I'm a really lucky person because I get to work with fabulous people. I get to work on really cool projects. I've got a couple of things I'm doing at the moment which are European projects. One is about European entrepreneurship education, and we're putting 5 universities together to run a program in Munich in July. I'm arranging a workshop at the European Parliament. Actually, that sounds really grand. I'm part of the team that's putting it on. But I get to do really fun things. And I get to talk to people like you. But if we go back over here, which is my journey, well, first of all, let me introduce you to George Edward Bear. Now, actually, he's George Edward Bear II because I'm told by my mum that George Edward Bear I had to go for a new fur coat when I was 1 year old. So maybe we don't ask too much about the first year. The other thing you will see on this chair is it was actually, if I open it up, it was my mum's storybook, but it was in the bookcase at my grandparents'. And I was the kind of child, once I learnt to read, where the thing I loved more than anything else was just being quietly able to curl up underneath the covers or in a chair and read a good book. And I wasn't too sure about all the other things that were going on in the world. So, can we have the first slide? There should be a presentation here. If there's not, I'm going to have to wing it. Okay, right, it's clear that some... All right, the first slide that I thought was going to come up would have had a picture of frogs and spiders and things like that on it, because when I was small, before I went to school, actually, probably the frogs, the spiders, the trees, the flowers in my back garden were my best friends. I was an only child. I was actually I'm the only one in my generation in my family. There are no cousins or anything like that. And although I was born in Scotland, neither of my parents were Scots. So it was an environment where I was left to get on with things in my own way. And actually, prior to going to school, what I remember is actually being pretty contented in my world. It was fine. Then I went to school when I was 4. I went to school and I started in January, which meant that everybody else had started in August, September time, and they had friends and things like that, and I was sort of running to do catch-up. And then I kind of went through school. I'll take you through this bit journey first. And probably when I was about 7 or 8, I really wasn't too sure about some of this school stuff. I loved learning. That hadn't gone away. And I loved the curiosity bit, but I was struggling a bit with some of the other things around school. I'd met a couple of teachers who, when I thought I was asking really good questions, saw me as impudent. I never quite seemed to get the timing right. There was a bit of bullying. It wasn't so good. So when I got to change schools at the age of 11, I went, I'm going to go to school with a new identity. I am now going to be the cool girl in class. I don't know what I was basing this on, but I just had, look, the ones who seem to have the friends are the ones who are ready to be defiant of teachers. So I became the girl who was willing to put the blackboard rubber on the back top of the rollerboard so that the maths mistress that everybody was scared of was going to get it on the top of her head when she came in. Because somehow I was going to get away from that other image. It's probably a good thing that after 2 years at that school I moved on and I went to boarding school in England. Yeah, that was a mixed blessing. I mean, some of it was really good, but I still seem to have this label of impudent. I dismayed my mother, who wanted a nice, bright, intelligent child that was going to make it to Oxford or Cambridge. Because even though I did reasonably well in my studies, and at times even got top grades, the only prize I left school with was a prize that they dug out of some old cupboard somewhere, which was a prize for creative enterprise. Interesting. And then I went to university to do engineering. I didn't particularly want to do engineering. I wanted to do medicine, but my parents weren't too keen on their only daughter doing medicine because you'd have to meet ordinary sick people of the general public. They kind of weren't so keen about it. I didn't get into medical school first time round, and I couldn't face a year at home with my parents disapproving of what I was going to do, having just spent 5 years being fairly independent, at least during school term. So I ended up going to university doing engineering. And I can probably say those were the worst 3 years of my life. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't get my head around the university system. I don't know that so much has changed in the last 30 years, but, you know, in terms of me being able to find my way around the university system, even though I work in one now. But I didn't enjoy it, and the one thing I'd said to myself, 3 years, that's it. I am never going back inside another education system and another university. Please note, that is the lesson that's not on these slides, but says, be very careful what you say you will never do, because it has a nasty habit of coming up and biting you. Because guess where I'm working now? And in my final year at university, one of my course tutors, when I suddenly realised that all the guys on the programme were coming in suits and short haircuts and looking not like the guys I'd been working with for the last 3 years, but something quite different, I went to my tutor and said, well, what shall I do? You know, what are my options? And he said, well, it doesn't really matter for you. You're a girl. You're only going to get married and have a family. Now, I'm a Taurian. That was not a smart thing to say, because that then committed me to going, I worked hard for this. I've done an engineering degree despite not having a maths qualification. I'm going to work as an engineer. So then I went and got a job in engineering, and I worked as an engineer for 8 years until I finally walked away from that. And then guess what? I found myself back at university again, because what did I do? I went and did an MBA. And you know, there's other bits of the thing, you know, that I could tell you about. But now I'm going to, now you've got a sense of what's happened to me, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've kind of learnt along the journey, or I wish somebody had just very quietly, many years ago, sat me down and said, Lesley, let me tell you a story. This is what your life could be like if you just go the way you're doing, but here are 1 or 2 things that would be a really good idea for you to just take a step back and know. And the first thing is that there is one person in life that you take with you wherever you go. That doesn't matter whether that's to boarding school or doing an MBA or designing water treatment plants in Egypt or whatever. That person is yourself. You can't get away from them. And you know what? The new outfit, the new course, the new relationship, the new job, it's a momentary distraction, but you're back to the fact you have to live with yourself. So take some time. Find out who you are. If, like me, actually, there's nothing quite so good as a good book. You don't mind if I have a quiet read for the moment, because there's an awful lot of you out there. That's who you are. And if you're not so comfortable doing the other stuff, then that's okay. There's some great resources out there. There's some great free resources out there in terms of doing things like the VIA, the key signature strengths that comes from positive psychology, that will tell you what your top signature strengths are and why that is naturally you. I've got flaky strengths for being in a university. In some ways, my top strength is forgiveness and mercy. It's followed by, I think, kindness and generosity, then loving and being loved. Well, all of those, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do in the world I live in at the moment. And then I think I've got curiosity and interest in the world. Now we're starting to get to some stuff that maybe I could actually use in the day job. But yeah, find out who you are. Even just the other week, I sat down and read a book by Susan Cain, Quiet, about introverts. You know what, it was like curling up on the sofa with my favourite storybook because it was talking to me, but it gave me permission. And I think that's one of the most important things. So let's move on. Right, next one. If you want to learn, teach other people. And if there is nobody to teach, teach your teddy bear, the dog, the cat. Now, to some extent, I guess my teachers in school did give me this one, because I know they kept me quiet by getting me to teach maths to some of the other pupils who weren't maybe learning so fast. My mother suffered this. I remember an incident when I was about 9 years old. We'd been doing dissection of fish in school, and I went home and managed to give my mum the entire lesson about how the gills on a fish work, because she thought we were having herring for tea. But you know what, when you teach, it opens up a different part of your brain, and you know when you're talking to someone else and you see them looking awfully blank and you hear blah 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 coming out your mouth, you soon know you're speaking rubbish, and it's the quickest way of finding out what it is that you actually probably need to go over and understand a little bit better. So, moving on, next one. If you really want to help other people, probably the best thing you can do is just invest in yourself. And one of the things that I've learnt and these two kind of link, when I do go on a course or something like that, when you're listening to it all, take some notes of the things that you think are really relevant. And then, as I said, go back and within 24 hours, tell somebody else about them. Those are the things that I've got in my kind of portfolio that I know I can pull out, and they're just there. The other stuff, sorry, it's gone. I've got the pieces of paper, but it's just gone. But invest in yourself, take courses, sign up for things like TED, all those sorts of things that make you think and keep you alive. Okay. If you want to avoid argument, now it's probably no surprise to you when you think about someone who's quite quiet, quite introverted, is trying to fit into a culture where they don't know whether they belong or not. Neither of my parents were Scots. I mean, I'm a Scot at one level because I was born in Scotland, but at another, the one thing that I grew up knowing was that I didn't know what the rules were, and that everybody else round about me sort of maybe saw things differently. I also felt like I was being brought up bilingual because I had proper English at home. I had Scots English in the playground, and I had proper academic English in the classroom. So I got into one or two arguments along the way because I'd been thinking a long time, probably before I came up with something. So when I came up with something, I'd read about it, I'd thought about it, I'd been mulling out with it. I would come out with it with great certainty and being very definite that this was a good idea. Not always well received by everybody else. So one of the things I've discovered along the way, if you want to avoid arguments, get good at jumping up to the big picture. Yeah? It's not difficult to get people to have some interest in what you're saying or what you've got to contribute. If you're talking about making the world a better place, world peace, let's find a way where somebody can enjoy what they're doing. Let's find a way of working together and collaborating. It's very, very, very easy to get into an argument when you start arguing about the details. Should one thing go first for the other? The other, that's why I've got to use a dictionary there. Because if I brought the rest of the props, I would have brought a pile of dictionaries. I've got about 10 or 11 sitting in my office. It's sort of fallen out of some of the education system now. But you know what? Words matter and definitions matter. And 2/3 of the time when you find you're actually arguing because you've got a different concept in your head. You're using the same language, but you've got a different concept in your head. So for the young people, I see quite a lot of young people out there, it might sound boring, but if you're studying a specialist subject, get a dictionary that's for that subject. It will make so many more things go fast. Some of you will probably know the thing that the word assume splits into us, you, me. So when you state your assumptions up front, you may upset somebody. So if I sit there and I look at somebody in the front row, I go, okay, well, you're frowning. By the way, he's not, but you're frowning. I assume that means that you're bored or you disagree. I may get a backflash and he immediately says, no, that's not true, I'm just being in. But at least I know where I am. When I don't state my assumptions, well, that's where it gets costly and expensive. All right, your best friend, the truth. Now, I am not suggesting here that this is you walk into work on Monday morning and say, actually, I'm going to tell you the truth. And these are all the terrible things I've done. This is the horrendous argument I had with my family or my partner yesterday. And by the way, I've been stealing the company's stationery for the last 12 months. That is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about simple everyday truths that make things easier. Now, I don't know if there's anyone out there who's like me, but you find sometimes networking events and things like that can be a little bit uncomfortable. You're kind of sitting there with a glass and trying to balance a glass, a plate, your name badges or whatever, looking around the room, do I know anyone? Use the truth, you know? Walk up to somebody. We haven't met, but I'm Lesley. Or I remember your face from somewhere, but I'm awfully sorry, I can't remember where and I can't remember your name. So just be honest about the little things. It's amazing how that just speeds things up. And people will recognise the truth. And often, you know what, you're letting them off the hook too. This comes from my world of enterprise and entrepreneurship, really. When an opportunity presents itself, so many of us will ask them, they'll look at it. You quite fancy doing it, but you'll ask yourself, can I do that or not? And the trouble with can I is it tends to really, it has a yes-no answer implied, maybe a maybe in the middle, but it's kind of yes-no. Change it, take the Red Indian approach, go, how can I, right? And even if you're in having the worst day of your life, where you've got no self-belief or whatever, how can I starts to generate a whole list of alternatives. Some of them wacky, some of them improbable, some of the ones you don't fancy very much. But you know what? Somewhere in that heap, there will be a positive step forward. This one's a little bit more complex, but I will try and see if I can give you a simple, easy conceptual idea of it. Who here knows somebody who has tried to lose weight? Yeah, quite a few of you. Or tried to get out of debt. Yeah, again, one or two of you. And if you thought about that person and I asked you how successful they were at losing the weight or getting out of debt, I'm making a rash assumption that in a lot of cases it would be not very, or they did, but they fell back again. Compare and contrast that with somebody who makes the decision that they want to be fit and healthy. Yeah? Or they want to be wealthy. Can you see the difference? Logically, it's the same thing, the same starting point. They're in a mess. Let's say they're in a mess with the weight thing. They're going, all right, there's logical answers. There's sensible food, there's exercise, there's getting a decent amount of sleep. Same thing, but maybe it's not. Because over here, when I'm talking about losing weight, my brain has probably just gone to chips, beer, pizza, chocolate, ice cream, second helpings, not. So I've thought of all those things I really want, and then having to use my willpower to go, no, and then I had to try and remember what I was doing in the first place, but I've only got it defined in the things I don't want. So the towards and away from, look at your goals, and if you find you're talking about something in terms of what you don't want, take some time to think about what it actually would be, or get a friend to help you. As I said, I currently work in a university. One of the things I do there is I work with students who have to give presentations and things like that. Have you ever seen somebody who they've done a talk or whatever else and they go, well, that's it? And the audience is trying to say thank you and whatever else, and I'm, shuffling. I'm thinking that's called kiss smile. If somebody is trying to give you something, say thank you, accept it. Even if it's not the present that you've always wanted, say thank you to what the world's trying to give you. And if need be, pass it on to somebody else who really does want it. But if you don't allow the good things to come in, then don't complain in life if you're sitting there saying, I haven't really got the friends, the support, the other things that I need and want. Work with your teachers. Now I'm saying teachers in the broader spectrum of things. Of course, there's the formal ones. But there's also the other teachers along the way who might be your friends, your parents, your next door neighbours, the people you work with. but work with them. They, even if what's coming across doesn't necessarily feel like what you want to hear right now, the good ones are already on your side. They're only working with you because they want your success. The ones that have maybe slightly lost their way at the time and are getting impatient with you because you're not doing something, they also want you to, maybe they've got away from motivation, but nonetheless, if you don't succeed, they don't succeed either. And probably if it's in a formal setting, they're going to have to do extra work. And I can tell you, for somebody who, I haven't always worked in, as you know, I haven't always worked in education, but I have for the last probably 20 years. I take absolutely no pleasure at all in having to resit papers, resit assignments, and then watch somebody not get through them again. There's no joy in that at all. So, you know, there's more help out there than you might think. So that's basically my 10-point journey. You can probably figure that some things in life haven't really changed. I'm more likely to be reading a self-help book or watching a film on my iPad. This is one of my current best friends when I curl up in a chair to read or to study. It was my mum's hot water bottle and now it's mine. And that's basically my journey. Thank you very much for listening.